Hmm. So this week's topic is very tender for me, and in large part because I'm in preparation for a trip that I'm going on next week. And yeah, I'm going to Bali to visit my friend Lauren, and obviously for whatever other reason that I'm going that I'll discover along the way. And kind of a bit of a sidetrack in terms of that. I think it's so fascinating how, we find ourselves in these positions where we feel like we have to justify why we're doing something like this. You know, I can't tell you what this trip will mean to me, but I can tell you that I felt really called to go. It's important to me. And beyond that, I can see far in terms of vision. I can see these pieces that are like reordering and shifting, but I can't know. And it's fascinating to me how much conversation seems to revolve around that. This isn't even the topic I'm wanting to go into, but I think it's good and it's important. Yeah, it's really fascinating to me, and I catch myself in it also, asking, oh, so why are you doing that? What's that all about? Rather than like, hey, like what's alive for you? Or um wow, it sounds like there's something moving in your space, and being open and receptive without guiding and like looking for justification and answers and reasons why, and so on and so forth. Um, yeah, and so I'm not looking for a result or an outcome, but there's a tenderness here because it does feel like a transition, and it feels like a bit of an initiation in a lot of ways for lots of different reasons. One of them being, I've entered this phase that I'll call the dark feminine, the wild feminine, the enchantress, however you want to look at her. And I'll record a whole other episode just on this. This concept of this third phase of a woman's life. So rather than these three archetypes of the maiden, mother, and crone, I've come to really understand and embrace the third phase. So maiden, mother, enchantress, crone. And that enchantress piece gets left out. And there's lots of good reasons why. Maybe not good reasons, but there's reasons why. And not to mention the fact that those three archetypes were actually created by a man. So it's quite likely that the archetypes themselves are just simply not fully understood from that feminine perspective. And so this phase of life is like fall, right? If you imagine the maiden as spring, the mother as summer, and the enchantress as fall, and then the crone as winter. That makes a lot more sense in a seasonal perspective, as cyclical beings. And yeah, so I'm entering that phase, or I'm in it. I'm right in it. My children I have one child who's almost 20. My daughter just turned 17. She's ready to move out as of next year. My son's in university. And so they're moving on with their lives. Like, they don't need me in the same way that they used to need me. And so I've become much more of a witness to their lives rather than this force that creates for them. It's really them creating. I show up in the ways that I can and I feel called to, and they ask for. But it's just not the same. And really, I feel that's an important phase that's being moved through. I still haven't touched on what I'm going to talk, what this is focused on. So what I'll say is that I want to dive into how these transitions, how these times in our life, we have choices in terms of how we approach them. And what I want to speak to is this understanding, this surrender to, letting it change you. And there are lots of ways that we will approach change and transition, and particularly when there hasn't been a lot of experience or teachings in how to hold challenging emotion. We often will kind of jump the gun, like get it over with as fast as possible. Or it will be like white knuckling, like, oh my God, I'm along for the ride, but I'm not actually participating or asking questions or like engaging in a meaningful way. And then it kind of just like, I don't know, I've heard Francis Weller say this in relation to grief. He was talking about somebody that he was working with who had a heart attack and was still like, and after that was still like in his shit, like still in it. And he's like, I'm afraid you're going to be wasting a perfectly good heart attack. And I think about that a lot, of like, how often do we want to rush through those challenging moments and experiences because of the discomfort of it, because we haven't learned how to hold difficult emotion or difficult experience. There's like a lack of understanding how to contain, like that skill of containment, of holding without pushing away or necessarily like burying down, because that's not okay either. Those pieces need to be learned and nurtured. And it's my understanding and my felt sense that this is a skill that was known, was held, and is part of what this aspect, this third season of life, in that wild feminine, that enchantress that like knows how to hold that, like is a grief walker, can move into the spaces of shadow, can hold truth and just the intensity of change and truth with I don't even want to say grace. It's not even that. It's just with like a rawness and with a willingness to be so fully in it. And I do believe that that's part of this phase, like of life, this archetype maybe would be a better way to put it, because it does exist in all stages of life, and yet it seems to be more pronounced during this stage that I'm talking about. It just seems to be really present and an important gift. It's like, say we're speaking about the phase of motherhood, and we move into this next phase of like letting go of that, or almost like releasing the karmic ties that we have, and not to no longer mother or to no longer be an important presence, but it's just like a different role that we play in our children's lives at that point. And it becomes a much more inward and downward journey, a darker journey, an earthier journey. And there's a lot of fear in the cultural narrative around all of these words that I've just shared. Think about what comes up when I say dark. Like, it's a dark journey. Does that mean bad? Does that mean wrong? Does that mean evil? Like, there's all of these really strange things. But what comes up most in terms of fear is the power that exists in this space. It's a very powerful archetype. It's a very powerful time. And that power can be disruptive if it's not in line with the cultural narrative. And it's not, and it's simply not in line with that. And so what I mean by, say, this transition that I'm in, or any transition, whether it be a relationship or a job, or just a time in your life where something's just not fitting, it's time to shift it, or perhaps change is thrust upon you through the death of a loved one, or moving, or whatever that might be. That tendency to push it away or to shove it down within us, rather than to like allow it to move through and allow it to change us. We're missing it. We're wasting that raw, beautiful energy of transition. Yeah. And I don't say that because it's easy. Like, I'm not going to pretend like this is easy to move through transition in this way. And oftentimes I've noticed for myself, my body knows so much sooner than my mind does. Like, I'll start to process something in my body before I'm even aware that it's happening. And what a beautiful gift that is, like the somatic aspect of transition and change, like the beauty of that. And if we push it away, if we shove it down, if we like white knuckle it through, then that becomes stored in our tissues. Like, that becomes a physical experience that this is my belief, my understanding. Like, it becomes illness, it becomes dis-ease in the body, it becomes injury, it becomes the place where we protect, and therefore injury occurs around it or because of it. And so it's really this beautiful understanding that if we allow life to change us, if we allow these times of change and transition to change us, it's like it builds a readiness, it builds a capacity, a resilience within the body, the mind, the spirit, the emotional aspect of self. And even if we have, started to store some of those pieces, it gives us the tools, the exact tools and healing knowledge that we need to move it, to release it, to allow it to express. And it's fascinating. It kind of reminds me of, the importance of viruses and bacteria and fungi and parasites in the body. We've co-evolved with these tiny little creatures, and virus isn't a creature, but we've co-evolved with all of these things in our body. And you know what? This is my space, to be honest. So I'm going to be as honest as I fully can. This is why I don't believe in vaccines at all, because the body knows what to do. And if we don't allow ourselves to be changed by, the very things that are in our body, which are being created in relation to our environment, it's like, if we don't allow that to happen, we're ill-equipped for the world that we live in. And so I do understand the intent behind vaccines. They're just unnecessary. We have an inbuilt system. Vaccines are simply a moneymaker, right? It's like anything else that's become commodified, monetized. It's such utter bullshit. Like, okay, that's like a whole other tangent. Maybe I'll go down that route. I had no idea I was going to talk about that. But this is that space where I'm choosing to be fully honest. And yeah, I'm not asking for arguments or even challenge in that way, because we all have our own opinions and experience. Yeah, and I've been in this space for a long time and really had that experience for a long time. So let's even speak to that. So if I don't allow it to change me, what ends up happening? Sure, I might experience an illness, like a temporary illness, and then build the antibodies, build the immune capability, build the resilience in my body. But if I keep pushing it away, if I keep numbing the symptoms, if I keep ignoring what's causing it, it just gets bigger and bigger, and the body starts to break down and starts to become injured or diseased. And the same goes for our mind, our psyche. It also goes for our emotional state and our spiritual state. So how often are you gifted knowledge or wisdom that's saying, hey, this needs to happen. You need to do this, and you ignore it. Or you like push it off to the side and kind of like wish it away. How does that feel for you? And what I can say for me is it's temporary relief, but it sure as fuck is not in line with that higher experience of purpose and mission and possibility. It's like this, it just slowly starts to eat away at you, eat away at your self-confidence, eat away at your ability to express, eat away at that experience of purpose. Like when you don't listen, when you don't fully engage with it. And oh my goodness, there's so many times in my life where I've done that. And you know, there's places right now that I'm uncovering where I continue to do it and I'm just no longer willing to. That's one of the gifts of this archetype of the Enchantress is like this time where everything is brought to light. It's like we do the shadow work to bring things to the light, to be seen, to be known, to be spoken. Yeah, and if I chose not to let it change me, if I chose not to let it like move through me and affect me, I would just be continuing on my merry way, my body, my mind, my sense of purpose just breaking down over time. And that's just no way to live in my mind. And there's this other piece that I think is really important when we look at what it means to let it change you, let life change you, let the experience change you. And that's this readiness that comes from really embracing that. And the recognition that we can't know the future from the place that we're at right now. So if we don't allow it to change us, we actually can't become, right? We almost become stuck in time instead. So I'm trying to think of how to phrase this, but at the level of mind, you know, everything that we've done in the past, everything that we've experienced, that we've known, that exists in the mind in this moment. The mind cannot accurately project into the future, nor can it possibly imagine the expression that might come through, the magnitude of purpose, the magnitude of magic that could come through. It's just not possible. Like that doesn't exist at the level of mind. And so if we don't allow these experiences, these times of transition to change us, we simply will not be equipped. We will not be readied. And we will miss out on these experiences, these potentialities, and not even just us. It's not just us who's missing out on it. Like we're hiding our gifts, our mission, our purpose from the world when we do that, from our communities, from the people that we love and care about. It's a disservice to humanity, to the humans and the more than humans, to the ancestors. Like it's a disservice to all. And so this is why it feels so important to talk about. And there's lots of ways that we can equip ourselves to be able to allow these experiences to change us. You know, there are folks out there who are doing somatic work. There are, spaces where we can go and be held in our experience, where we can express more openly and honesty, where we can do grief work, where we can do shadow work, where we can, you know, have meaningful and impactful conversations with people. There are these spaces. And so just please know that you aren't alone if you're in a time of transition. I can't speak to exactly what it is that you might need in that space. I just know that there are resources, there are people. And I've seen so much of it, and I've touched so many of those spaces. And there's so much that I don't know, and I'm excited to discover and just be in the discovery of. And so I'm reminding myself in this moment, just like I shared, I can't know what's to come from the level of mind. And so there's a trust that comes in. And I've spoken to this before, what is the universal field asking of me? And I think that we can also bring that in as a trust, as an understanding that in order to fully engage, to be in that receiving of that wisdom and that guidance, that we have to offer trust, and we have to offer the experience of surrender. If you haven't read the book, The Surrender Experiment by, oh my goodness, what's his name? Michael Singer. Highly recommend it. So good. And it just offers some really beautiful perspective, and maybe even that's a resource to help support in terms of allowing it to change you, to surrender to move into trust. And so I'm going to continue to be with this tenderness, to be with the emotions as they show up, to move my body as it's being asked to be moved, to cry when I need to cry. There's a lot that's moving through. Yeah. And my wish for you is that you know that these times of transition and change are for you, that they are intended to support you, to co-create your evolution. And so may you allow them to change you.